Hello. In this video I'm going to go through user workflows and the easiest way to do this is show them in action. So user workflows are menu structures in the system that you can create bespoke and give them to users. So in this system I've logged in as myself, Tom Roots, and you can see here I've got a number of workflows or folders specific to me with which have been bespoke created with their own forms inside and their own naming conventions. So that's the kitting workflow I've created, a sales demo workflow that has its own folder structure that I can use for demonstrations. So these have been specifically created for myself or for other users, so I can adapt the system to the way I want it to look and feel. It's like an advanced favourites, if you like. Now you can use those to give a user just what they need to see. So I've got a storesman here. If I log in as storesman, I've created a stores workflow, and that storesman can only see the items that I've created in that workflow. And likewise, they can use the inventory management module, so they've got full permissions on that. So you can see that below that. But essentially this stores person just has the workflow called stores workflow, seeing what they want, what they need to see, and none of the other areas of the system. Now I'm going to log in as the root user and show you how to set up these workflows or advanced favorite folders. So I'm logging in and there's a menu item called workflow admin. I'm going to start by creating a new one. So I'm going to call this new one delivery and invoice, and I'm going to give it to a couple of users, and I'm just going to put in that workflow some delivery and invoice elements. So I'm going to add, so I've clicked on the folder and I'm going to add a folder within my workflow and give it a name, and I've called it invoice and given it an icon. I'm going to create another one called delivery, give it a color scheme and close that. So I've got two folders within my workflow, delivery and invoice. And in the invoice I'm going to search for one of the forms within the system, reprint invoice, and on the right hand side there I've got all the system forms, and I'm just going to copy across reprint invoice. So I've placed that into my workflow, and I've also placed in display invoice, and I'm going to right click and amend the name of that, so when it appears in the workflow it has a different name. I'm just going to call it view invoice, and I'm going to give it an icon. So there we go, I've created, choose an icon, I've created there a folder within the delivery and invoice workflow and dropped in a couple of forms. On the delivery menu, I'm going to give this workflow the full delivery management folder structure, so it's dropped the whole lot in. I'm also going to give it CFC, certificate of conformity folder, so transfer that across. Make sure I put it on the right folder level because you can drop it within folders. So there you can see I've created those two. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to give delivery performance. I'm going to move that individual form back, so delivery performance isn't available in this workflow. So I've got two folders, and now I'm just going to allocate that to two users. I'm going to give it to Jack, and I'm also going to give it to Sarah. So when they log in, and I'm going to overwrite the system privileges. That means if they don't have permissions for areas, for forms that I've selected into the workflow, they'll see them regardless. So I'll overwrite the permissions. Now I'm going to edit a current workflow, so the stores workflow I currently had, and I'm going to give that to Jack as well. So the stores workflow that the storesman could see that I logged in. And I'm going to remove the supplier rejects, so just demonstrating amending that workflow. So I've created a new workflow and I've amended the stores workflow. Now I'm going to log in as those two users and just see if it's worked. So Jack first, log in as Jack, and there we go. In his workflow folder, you can see the stores workflow and that delivery and invoice workflow. There we go, and you can see below he doesn't have permission to use the delivery folders in the main list of forms, but he could access it. Now I'm going into Sarah, and if you look at Sarah, she's got full access to the system, and she's also got that one workflow, deliver an invoice. So it's worked fine. So to summarise, I've created a couple of workflows, I've allocated them to users, and I've opened up and shown them on the menu structure on the left hand side. These workflows are extremely useful for bringing new users up to speed on the system, as you can create a workflow for them and over time add in additional items as you've trained them on that area of the system, therefore bringing them up to full speed on a system. Their other useful functionality is for users such as storemen who just need to see certain bits of the system. You can give them a workflow just for those bits, and it makes the system look very easy to use and a lot less daunting when the user logs onto the system.